Hello and welcome back to Coast FC, the Canadian soccer podcast focused on all things CPL, Canadian Championship, and more. My name is Felipe Vallejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And today we are looking ahead to match day 2 of the Canadian Premier League. We're going to go over all of the action that went on this past weekend, some controversy, a lot of goals, a lot of talking points. And at the very end, we're also going to do a little bit of a preview for the Canadian Championship that it's starting today at the time of recording for Tuesday. But Mike, an exciting match week 2 for you. Did you think that it was better than match week 1?
Yeah, I mean it was exciting for me. It's one of those funny ones of having to watch in the UK because especially on the West Coast there it's 3 a.m. kickoffs. So I've had a funny time trying to organise my weekend, but it was well worth all the life admin getting it to get the time to see it.
Yeah, Mike, we're a real trooper, Mike, to try to keep up with the league on UK time. But like I mentioned, a lot of stuff happened. Just worthwhile things to stay up for. But before we dive into all of it, remember to follow us on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, as well as finding us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So you can see our beautiful faces there, and hit a follow on Canadian Soccer Daily as well, because we will be uploading clips from this episode's podcast on there throughout the week. But we are going to begin with our review of the CPL match week 2. We're going to start with game 1, which is actually in Vancouver again, or technically Langley. And it was the game that I went to start off the match week on a Thursday of all days. It felt like a very weird time to go drive. The traffic was terrible, which is why I hate midweek games or weekday games to Langley, especially for those that live in British Columbia and the Lower Mainland know how annoying the BC one can be to get down to Langley. But I made it there just about on time. I actually had the opportunity to talk to Mark Noonan, the CPL commissioner. He was there at the game, and I had a little chat with him before the match as well with Michael. If you're interested in that chat, I believe Michael McCall has put it on AFTN's latest podcast there, the interview. So if you want to check that out, you can. But it was a great game overall, great atmosphere. Again, I don't think it was as crowded as last week's. I believe the attendance record shows that, but obviously a Thursday night game, it's a little tough to get to compared to a weekend match. But it was 2 for 2 for the Eagles. They really have landed. Like Afshin Guppy said, it was a really good display from the home side. 2-0. Goals from Rocco Romeo in the 17th minute and Alejandro Güero Diaz in the 52nd minute. Lots to talk about here, Mike. Let's start first with Halifax, because I know I'll have a lot to chat about with Vancouver, but I'll give you the chance to maybe take the other side with Halifax, because I know you had a lot of thoughts on Halifax. What did you make of the opening 45? Because let's exclude the goal, because there's the first goal, because the first goal, there's a lot we can talk about there. But just on the basis of play in general in the first half, for me, it looked like the way that Halifax sort of set up with 3 in the midfield. It looked like a 3-5-2 kind of formation with Ryan Telfer super wide at like a wingback position. Caligari looked to be as an 8 instead of as a 6, or like in the double pivot. Did you feel like what Halifax was trying to go for was working for them? Because I wasn't really all that convinced by their opening 45 minutes.
No. This change of system and the way they're setting up, they've really wanted to get done into that back line. They don't want to sacrifice Nimic or Cavalry, so they've gone to this 3 at the back, and it's really messing with how the speed of their attack. There seemed to be some of it that come across on the TV trying to watch it, because obviously it's maybe a slightly different angle. It almost looked like they tried to have this like box midfield with Gagnon, Lapare, and Ramprasad at the back, Caligari and Daniels pressing in behind Valesky. But as great as Caligari is, he's not a high tempo, really quick player. Daniels, again, technically very gifted. He's not breaking lines and running past the striker. He's dropping deep and he wants the ball. Cavalry the same. Right, Telfer was so deep as well. He was almost playing like a left back way too often, and it just slows slows Halifax down. Like the joy of watching them last year was how excitingly quick they were. Everything was done fast. When they were out of possession, they counter pressed and they were quick to pounce. There was times where I think it was only in like the 25th minute or something. I think maybe 25th minute, Valesti goes to press, but no one's near him, and he turns around, he's throwing his hands up, getting frustrated with his teammates. It's just, I compare it slightly. Obviously, you mentioned you saw the boss working with the Whitecaps in the break, and the Whitecaps play this similar kind of system. And the thing that frustrates me when I watch the Whitecaps is when you lose players like Fafa Picault, because Ryan Gould, Brian Wright, and Damir Krylark are very good players, but none of them are that speed. Like, you lose a lot of speed from an attack without someone like Picault. And I'm finding that's what Halifax were. They're not. When they brought on Ferrin, the team were losing, and they brought on Coimbra. Like, they were losing. Vancouver were a bit deeper and managing the game more, but they were a little bit more threatening with their movements. But before that, in that first half, there was just really wasn't. Vancouver, just like they did against Valour, were able to get back in position and organise. I mean, it just felt like, I don't know how you saw it in the stadium, it just felt like Vancouver were a little bit more comfortable than they probably expected to be against Halifax.
Yeah, no, and that's, I think that was a question that was asked in the press conference of Afshin, because Halifax, it almost felt like Halifax's downfall was that they overcomplicated it a little bit too much.
Yeah.
I think, the way that Vancouver went about it was a lot more, not simplistic, but I guess in the sense that it wasn't as convoluted as what I think Halifax went through. They had a simple game plan. They followed it both in attack and in defense and in transition. And I think that for Halifax, it was just it almost felt like they were their own worst enemies in some cases. Just they were disjointed in the midfield. It felt like they weren't really able to attack. And I mean, credit to Vancouver, because one of the things that impressed me the most from Vancouver in this match is how structured they were. When they were defending, when they were in their 4-4-2, basically, they were very compact. They were not allowing Halifax to find those spaces in between the lines to be able to break through. Halifax had to try to go long, and Halifax, Dan Nemec, we know, loves a good diagonal, but I don't know what it was, but Dan, like, I want to talk about in a little bit about Dan Nemec specifically, but just Halifax weren't able to do those threatening, cross pitch balls that allows them to open up the game more. Vancouver were very well structured. It was really frustrating, Halifax. And I think in the way that they're trying to play now in their new sort of formation with this pure three at the back, I don't think the players are used to it yet, especially the wing backs. It's something that takes so long to ingrain into some players, because they're used to, like, if you're a wing back, you have to defend and be part of a back five. And when you're not used to it, then you have those moments of hesitation where it's like, do I stay? Do I go? Do I stay? Do I go? And those seconds are valuable in terms of how you want to build up, especially because Halifax want to build up so quickly. They want to have fluid attacks, 1-2 touches max. If you have any amount of hesitation, those things break down. And I felt like they really were breaking down a lot in the first half. And it made it seem like Vancouver were comfortable when, like you mentioned, they probably shouldn't have been. I mean, Halifax did have more possession, but Vancouver were very smart in that they sort of baited Halifax, because Halifax liked to press and to try to win the ball back high, and they baited that. Then they did long balls in behind, and Dan Nemec and Patrice Geyser mentioned it was like that they hurt us, and that's almost like that simple way where it's just like balls in behind. You have Dyer and Diaz, especially Dyer, that are running in behind. They're very good physical players that can hold up the ball and wait for support to come in. And the biggest thing for them was, pouncing on some mistakes. And that was, something that was pretty rife in this game, especially from the Halifax side. Which I think let's move on to the first goal, which was Rocco Romeo's 17th minute goal. I wish I could show, for the visual viewers, the goal itself, because I could not believe my eyes on what was going on.
I had to rewind it.
Yeah, it looked like a simple corner to deal with from Halifax. It went to the back post. No one was there. Jeremy Gagnon Lapare. I don't know why. I mean, I can understand in theory. You want to just have an easy header back to the goalkeeper so he can get it, and then you guys can start quickly, and it can be more secure rather than maybe him having to clear it to the to the byline and get another corner or give them another throw in or risk losing possession, whatever it may be. Really dangerous back pass. Like, it was with some pace, and I don't think Fillion was expecting it at all. Some blame could be put on Fillion, but to be fair, I don't think he was ready for it whatsoever. He fumbles it. He fumbles it, and then the chaos ensues, and in the end, Rocco Romeo has a simple tap in to make it 1-0. And what was so funny is that as the celebrations were going on, I looked down at the Halifax bench, and the entire time Patrice Geyser was standing up, was giving instructions. He was lively. When they scored, he was sat down on the bench, just head in hands for a solid 30 seconds. Or a minute. He just could not believe that all of the work that they've been putting in for the last few days and everything to try to come here and get a result was just undone in 17 minutes through an absolutely mindless mistake like that at the back. And it kind of sums up Halifax's entire day, I think, just because it was just poor decision making, a little bit of chaos, franticness, and something that Dan Nimick and Patrice also said in the post match was that's something that Vancouver FC thrive off of, which I think comes from the way that Vancouver play. Alex Gange-Ruzek and I were in the press box, as well as Samuel Rowan from the third sub, and we were all joking that if you look at Patrice Guys and the way he likes to set up his team in Halifax, it reminds you of the super tactical positional play coaches like De Zerbi, like Guardiola in the Premier League. And then you have Afshin Gopi and Vancouver FC that they're structured. It's not like they're not organized. They are organized and they're well organized and structured, but it almost feels like they play off vibes a little bit. And it reminds me of Real Madrid and Carlo Ancelotti, where it's just the team, you just kind of have to rely that they'll be able to pull through the chaos just through their talent. And that's what it felt like, because they thrived off that chaos. And maybe it's a little bit to do with last season. That was the only thing they could do. They weren't structured. They weren't organized. So they had to just play off vibes. They had to play off whatever was thrown in front of them, snatch any chances they had. Maybe that same mentality transferred into this year now with better players and with more organization, but they can still have that sort of little bit of edge when they are in those moments of chaos. And I think that was them taking advantage of it. And it was the same thing in the second half, going to Diaz's goal, a mistake in behind. Dan Nimick miscontrols it. Really good play from Moses Dyer to pounce and take it off him, to be able to, cut inside, leave, I think, one or two man for dead. And then his shot, unfortunately, hits the post, drops to Weddle Diaz. Weddle Diaz gets a goal. His first goal since the second week he was there last summer. That's how long it's been of a goal drought for Weddle Diaz. So unfortunate for Moses Dyer, but it could not have fallen to a better player than Weddle Diaz for him to be able to get that goal. Afshin had a great quote afterwards where it was like, goals are like vitamins to strikers. You don't have enough of them and they get depressed. So hopefully that picks up Weddle Diaz's mood for the next few weeks. But yeah, for you, the goals themselves, do you think that they reflected the passage of play? Obviously, it was two mistakes, but did you feel like they were deserved for Vancouver, especially in the way that they started playing in the second half, where I feel like they even stepped it up an extra gear?
Yeah, they just looked the more threatening side. It probably wasn't I don't think Afshin Gopi probably would have thought it was the perfect attacking performance from his team. But when you looked at both of the teams, and their passages of play, Vancouver were able to mix up their attack better than Halifax. And we would say exactly, I mean, we said last week, yeah, they got to do this, but it was against a poor Valour side. So let's see what happens when they come up against a better opponent. But they did it again, and they did make Halifax look like the weaker side. I mean, this is pretty similar team to last season of Halifax. So it's not like they've lost a load of players and this is an unknown. Like, this was a very good side last year, and Vancouver were the more threatening when the attacks went forward. You could see the players on the ball, and Renan Garcia and Vasco Fry, especially when they receive the ball in the middle of the pitch, they've got different options. You can go with different types of attacks, and when you have that, you're going to be the more threatening team. And I mean, Moses Dyer has been a fantastic sign. He's a bit like a pit bull at the top there. That you can see he's giving the opposition defenders questions to answer, and he's making it difficult for them. Whereas in this match, Valesky just didn't do that. I mean, Rocco Romeo was booked really unfairly after 3 minutes.
Oh yeah, that was a crazy shot from the goalkeeper, from the referee there, where it was he did nothing and he got a yellow card, and we were like, oh, here we go again, another referee going to give poor Rocco a sending off. And the rest of the half, we were all saying, like, he's gonna get sent off because he just kept being aggressive. He didn't let up whatsoever.
Exactly.
Ridiculous.
But they didn't have the threat of a pacey player up against him that he had to worry about, and I think he managed the game really well. But if you've got someone like Ferry in there early on in the game, and you're playing those diagonal passes, and he's trying to get in behind, like, you would have thought that Halifax would target it, but they didn't. So Vancouver knew what to do, and I think Halifax were too busy trying to make something work, and by the time they realized it wasn't going to work, it was too late.
Yeah, exactly. It was just, there were some moments of Halifax where they did look threatening. Dynamic had a chance, like in the 24th, 25th minute, right at the end of the half. Daniels was driving in. No one from Vancouver was stepping up for some reason. He had a clear look on goal, tried to side foot curl it into the top corner, went just high and wide. So there were chances for Halifax. It wasn't enough. And then, like you mentioned, in the second half, Timoteo came on for Cale Lockery. They went back to a 4 at the back. And, Geyser was explaining, is like, so we could have a little bit more solidity in the back line, but it took a man away from the midfield. It took a man away from the attack. So they kind of invited even more pressure. By doing it. It was kind of like there was always a risk and a gamble of taking a player away from the midfield and putting him into the defense, where you kind of invite more pressure even if you are more solid. And that's why I think in the second half, like, Vancouver had much more of a handle on the match. But I mean, overall, fantastic results for Vancouver FC to be able to celebrate with their the Fraser Valley Fanatics, who had some really nice tifos again, and make it 2 from 2, top of the table, and they're really looking like a dangerous side. I know you were talking about that you were excited to eat your words on today's episode, so you feel free to take the floor on that.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this team, and I've probably had too much of like a ex-Football Manager player, like, I've got too many players, so you've got to constantly rotate them to keep them happy and like make sure, and then you don't ever get this run. But like, Afshin Gotby's got his starting 11. He knows what he wants, and players are, and we're only 2 games in. We'll see how things change, and this starting 11 isn't going to play every single match. But he seems like he's got his 11 that he wants to play, and other players are going to have to work their way into it, and rotations will come with rest. But it's really impressive, and they've really started well. And probably the most impressive thing to say is that the teams are changing their formations, they're changing their style of play when they, at least like Valour, I mean, it's hard that they had the red card, but Halifax especially are making changes because they're worried about what Vancouver are doing. And Vancouver are going out and they're saying, right, this is us and this is how we're going to play. Whereas last season, Halifax would have done that, and teams would have gone, oh God, how do we manage this? And how do we just try and be safe and secure against this team? Whereas it's the other way around now, and teams are worried about Vancouver.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to the way that Afshan Ghabi likes to handle his team, that they're playing so well. Now he has the standard of players that he was wanting since day one last year, and he was
Yeah.
unable to have. The concept of rotation is going to be a very interesting one because there are players that are not playing. They're not dressed, like Elijah Ba, James Cameron, Anthony White, Elliot Simmons, I believe, had an injury. So
Yeah,
that's why
he's
he hasn't been. But
coming
he's
back,
back
isn't
in
he?
training. And I shouldn't even mention, these players outside of the 18, they've been training so well, especially Elliot Simmons, that with today's game against Cavalry coming so soon, 5 days after the game against Halifax, and then Vancouver's in like 3 days again are playing away. You're
Yeah.
going to need to have rotation. You're going to have to change players. So you want these players hungry. Can you manage egos in such a big group? And we know that Afshan Ghabi is a manager that you sort of either hate him or love him. Can you manage the egos of some of these players that maybe feel like they deserve more of a chance, at least a spot on the bench, like maybe like Elijah Ba or James Cameron, probably the biggest one, Anthony White as well.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see how those players react and how the team sort of continues to grow and develop, and if everyone sort of unifies under the badge, because I feel like if they do that, then they have incredible potential. But I'm worried
Yeah.
about if there's any sort of discord between the players or between the players and the coach because of certain players not playing. That's going to be probably the biggest storyline to watch for Vancouver FC as the season goes on.
Yeah.
But before we finish up, just quickly want to talk about Halifax and Dan Nimick and Julian Dunn specifically as the two players, because Julian Dunn has come in and he hasn't had a great 2 games. Obviously, gave away the penalty in the first game against Pacific, and then this game, same thing. Just I don't know, it just looked frantic. It looked sort of lost at times. Didn't feel comfortable. And Dan Nimick, that was so good last
Yeah.
season, made that mistake and wasn't that sort of ball playing defender that we saw like to see often. I don't know if it was because of this new role being in the back three instead of the back two that maybe stunted his play. But for you, Mike, do you think that these players, they just need some time to settle into the new system, or is this maybe something that Patrice should take in consideration in terms of his team selection for the upcoming games?
Yeah, I mean, I would personally be saying go back to the back four. I think Nimick looked more comfortable. I think taking away the fullback from his side changes how you can build up play. And just by going from a back four to a back three, it's not just a quick, simple, oh, there you go, there's an extra body in the center of the defense, like we'll be more defensively secure now, we've got more bodies. It doesn't work like that because the players in front of them have changed, the players to the side of them have changed. Where they are in build-up is different. So they're being pressed in different ways that they were from last year. And I really think that like Zachary Fernandez hasn't been nowhere near as threatening as he was last year in attacking play, but he's been pushed further forward. Like, so because the whole system isn't working at the moment, and if Patrice guys is going to continue with this, there'll be some more bumps going forward. Like players are going to have to get used to it. But part of me would wonder, like, it's a big call, but maybe you've got to drop one of these defenders and go back to the system you were playing last year that was so successful. You've lost a lot from different parts of the pitch with this change of system.
Yeah, and the thing with Halifax is that, like Patrice guys have mentioned, they committed the entire preseason to this. So this is the system that he wants to do moving forward. I don't know how easy it'll be for them to revert back to the old system, at least. I think they'll stick with it for a few games. He said to give them until July. I think July is when he said that he will start to see the team click properly in this system. So we'll see what happens between now and then, if they can sort of make up ground afterwards, or if they can, steal some points. But yeah, it's going to be a big few games, I think, for Halifax in the coming weeks, because it'll really show how much they need to learn in this new system, because we know they have the quality players. We know Patrice is a fantastic coach, but in a new system, after what felt like a really good system last year in year one, to change it up immediately in year two with a bold move. We'll see if it starts paying off sooner rather than later. At least that's what hopefully the Halifax fans will be wishing to as well. But it's going to be.
We can't ignore that they've been on the road as well. Like playing it, like they weren't great on the road last year, but at home, that crowd behind them will do a lot more. And I think they will probably see a little bit more energy in the next home game.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And hopefully it'll be a great showing from the kitchen as per usual in that one.
Yeah.
But now we're going to move on to our next game. It's going to be staying in BC again. The BC boys are just winning. Pacific and
good vibes over on the West Coast,
City.
isn't it?
Exactly. West Coast, West Coast. Sorry, East Coast. But yeah, Pacific against Valour FC. Another 2-0 win. Pacific copying Vancouver FC there. Goals from Josh Hur in the 47th minute and Sean Young in the 79th minute. The first half, I put a little bit of the sleepy thing again, maybe a little harsh because there was some chances. It wasn't like last week, Cavalry Forge, but it was a little bit of a sleepy first half. There was, I think, 2 shots on target between both teams in that first half, between Pacific and Valour. But it really came alive in the second half. But in the first half, from a Valour perspective, it was quite good. From a Pacific perspective, it felt like they were lacking some intensity. They were lacking some real, gusto in the way that they wanted to play. And it was a big call from James Merriman to make 3 substitutions at halftime. And it paid dividends. But for the first half, what do you think was going wrong with Pacific in that first half, where they weren't really creating all that much chances? I mean, Daddio Zanata looked the most dangerous player on the pitch for Pacific, but aside from that, it didn't look like they were doing all that much in the first half.
No, it was. Yeah, it wasn't the quickest of games. I think they looked at this Valour team and the way they played against Vancouver the week before. And probably just tried to be a little bit more patient. Chances will come. Let's not force it, and let's just try and manage the game. And it will start off like that, but it just meant that as that first half went on, you sort of saw that it's like you've also got to go out and make chances. You can't expect them to just arrive. And yeah, like you say, Darius Anata had some good movements at Louvre. Obviously, it's quite often very adventurous when he gets the ball. And Stefan Yates, I thought, was like in the midfield. There was the more sort of adventurous out of the center of midfield. I'm surprised Pierre Lamoth's playing so much in these first 2 games. He seems to not really. He seems to be just like, okay, he's had an okay game, but there's nothing that you see in there where you go, there's like, you could quite easily notice, like, forget that he's part of, like, he's in that starting lineup at times. He doesn't really bring out too much. There's no defense splitting pass that you're like, oh wow, okay, he's got like an attack started, and it's very conservative, very sort of just trying to not to make a mistake kind of football. And that's why. I mean, that's James Merriman must have sat there and thought, actually, we can't just coast through this one. I need to liven them up, and those 3 substitutions really did.
Yeah, and for Valour, you look at that first half, and I read the match report afterwards, and I forget who exactly wrote it, if it was Mitchell or Charlie or Benedict. No, it was Alex, because he was at the game. He talked about how Valour were left ruining their chances. Because in the first half they had one really good chance, which was from Sean Hundle. That header that he missed, and it looked like Valour were in it. I don't know if it was more the Pacific weren't as intense and weren't really bringing it to them as much as maybe was expected, but Valour looked to actually do pretty decent. That's some decent passages of play. Temi Antonoglu did
again, that was a great ball in from him, wasn't it?
Yeah, fantastic ball in for
Mm,
him. That Gazdov again, who Gazdov had another really good performance as well.
yeah,
Gazdov had to deal with Temi Antonoglu. I think is one of the brightest spots of Valor. Another young left
yeah,
back, like last year it
yeah.
was Mateo. This year it's Antonoglu. Um, but yeah, I just felt like Valor. They're a team right now that when they get opportunities, they need to put them away because they're
Mm,
not quite there in terms of being able to see out a game or get, be able to have the mentality to get late goals and snatch points at the end. They need to start strong and then just defend for their lives
mm,
is the way that I see where Valor are at, and the fact that they didn't have that, I think was the biggest thing that hurt them this game, aside from maybe the defensive organization in the second half.
mm.
But I think do you think that maybe Jordan Faria's suspension, the fact that he got red card in the first match, and Abdul Binat had to come in, hurt Valor a
Mm.
bit, or was it more just the team and Sean Hundo, which I want to talk about in a little bit of him specifically, but the team was just not quite at the races in this game again.
No, yeah. I mean, I was quite impressed with Benate, with obviously my Valor goggles and lower expectations. Like, not saying he was a standout player on the pitch, but I was quite impressed with some of the bits he did, and you could see signs of, okay, well, if he can develop in this team, then he could be quite a useful player. I'm still out on Swivel. I didn't think he had a great game again in this one. I've got big concerns over Verhoeven with Campbell as that central midfield. It doesn't seem um, as all like it doesn't look. It's just not imposing. Dante
Hmm.
Campbell's done fantastic work, and he is getting forward. He's battling away throughout games. Like, how he's not been sent off is pretty impressive, because the
Yeah.
amount of fouls he gives away, like the numbers, surely will start adding up too much. But I'm not sold on Noah Verhoeven alongside him as a two in that midfield. Yeah, they've got a bit of energy, but there's not. It's just missing something. It's just not matching up for me right now. As like, okay, I can see why they're the chosen pair. But yeah, it is just a bit of a couple of players look like that's decent. Maybe that could improve, and then some players, it's like I'm really not sure why you're in the first 11, and that's too many questions about this Valor team, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a bit difficult, and you could really see the class, the gap, the golfing class kind
Mm,
of show in the second half, because, like we mentioned, when Pacific made those three subs, which I think it was Toussaint, Hurd, and
was it
somebody
Kunle?
else came in. Kunle Dadaluk, yes, and Kunle
Mm,
Dadaluk coming on for Amadume, Salouf, and Lamoth.
mm,
You could tell, okay, Pacific have finally entered a new gear, because almost immediately,
yeah.
like within minutes, you saw the combination, that play that ended up with Josh Hurd. And I want to talk about
Mm.
that fantastic goal, because as somebody that loves good passing plays, the
Yeah.
way that Pacific played out of their uh, corner flag, but just third man passing, just
Mm,
finding the free man, just pass and move, finding those diamonds, and then Stefan Yates chipping it over to Cedric Toussaint, and Cedric Toussaint, a fantastic ball in behind for Rian
yeah.
Moore. And that's what we've been saying with Rian Moore. It's like Rian Moore
Mm,
he's a big guy, but he's quick. If you can put those
yeah.
balls in behind, not only will he get there, but he will defend it. And that's exactly what he did. He was
Mm,
able to hold off his marker, put it across for Josh Hurd, and Josh Hurd, it was a tap in, but it was actually very difficult to execute because everybody was closing in. He had a split second to get that
yeah.
ball, actually get the contact to be able to put it into the back of the net, and he did do that. So it
Mm,
wasn't an easy goal by any margin, but fantastically worked play, and it came from all of the players that we just mentioned, the players that came in, these subs, and
yeah.
made an instant impact. And for James Merriman to do that again, it was a bold thing, but I think that's one of the things that I really like from managers.
Yeah.
is like when they see that something's not working, they're like, we got to change the thing now. A lot of managers are like, I don't want to disrupt, the play. I want to see how it goes out a little bit. They're a little bit more hesitant. They're more cautious and more pragmatic. But James Merriman said, no, this is not working. I'm going to make the
Yeah.
changes now so that we can go out and start the second half strong. And that's exactly what they did. And it was a masterstroke from Merriman because they got the results. Thanks to those energy players, those experienced players that they brought in. And it was a fantastic goal overall.
Yeah, and definitely. And like you say there, like James Merriman's made a big call, and it was fantastic. I mean, just looking back to the game we just spoken about, what if Patrice Geyser had made a couple of subs at halftime and changed how they were attacking Vancouver? Maybe things could have been different. But I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing. But they did really look like a different team, weren't they? And I think what has to be sort of highlighted as well, it wasn't involved in that goal, but getting Kunle Dadalouk back from obviously the suspension, that adds so much to them, to how Pacific play, and it frees up the threat he provides in an attacking play, open space for other players in the pitch as well, who can threaten. So it's getting him back is going to be vital for this team.
Yeah, no, he's. We've seen in the few games that he wasn't there. Last year in the playoffs and in the first game there, that they weren't exactly the same team. And now the fact that he is back, you can sort of see the impact that he has. So another layer to Pacific's depth and talent that they have in the squad. We got to talk about also Sean Young, because it was a very special night for Sean Young. It was his Centurion appearance, 100 appearances for Pacific. Obviously, the fact that he's a local boy, Victoria, born and bred, making his start joining 2019 as a youth and managed to develop, and now he's this like starter, and he was a fantastic player last season, especially in the first half of the season, and hopefully he can continue that form into this season, maybe a little more consistently. He popped up with a goal in the second half as well to make it 2-0. It was obviously the fairy tale. It had to happen there for the script writers. Again, a well-worked goal. Probably should have put it away, but in the end, it had to be Sean Young to tap it in. It just, everything fell in place. And that sort of, I think, as soon as that second goal went in, it kind of killed the game. Like as soon as it was 2-0, I was like, okay, that's it. I don't see Valour being able to get back into this match, and I don't see, I think it was 11 minutes left in the game, and I don't see Pacific losing this at all. If anything, it looked like they were going to go on and add to it.
Yeah.
Did you feel like that was I don't even know if it's a turning point, more like the nail in the coffin in the game was Sean Young's goal?
Yeah, I mean, they look confident, and once that went in, I mean, Sean Young, like fantastic achievement, getting 100 caps, like 100 appearances already, getting a goal, and he's taking a huge role in this midfield now for the team. Like obviously with Aparicio leaving, and it doesn't seem to be all that heavy on his shoulders. He seems to be getting along. His game's slightly different to last season in the way that he's being used, but it looks like he's happy and comfortable in the role that he's being asked to do out there, and it's great to see. Really pleased to see him cap it with a goal as well. And as much as I thought, I mean, this one they'll just ride out, maybe get another one. I mean, Zachary Baus was really desperately trying to give Valour something. I mean, there were a few. There was 2 or 3 really sloppy passes back, which just gifted Valour opportunities to try and build attacks. But he he tried his best for them, but Valour couldn't capitalize.
Yeah, and he arguably should have scored at the end to make up for his errors in the 89th minute. The goalie was gone. It was just him against Samake, and he put it right at Samake. And fantastic for Samake to make that goal-live clearance. But Bahus should definitely have done better.
It's an interesting cameo from him.
Yeah, exactly. If he would have scored that, it would have been all forgiven. But the fact that he didn't is still like, But talking about Valor, I want to talk about Sean Hundal specifically because he was a ghost in this game
Mm,
for majority of the game. He had that huge chance in the first half that he should have put away. Such a
yeah,
weak header, and you'd expect a player of his quality and a player that has so much expectation on him to do better. Because we were talking about it before the season started. Sean Hundal has to be that guy for Valor. He's the
yeah.
big number 9. He's the one that they're expecting to get all the goals for them. He's the one that they're relying on. And it's only been 2 games, so I don't
Mm.
want to ring the alarm quite yet, but hasn't really impressed, and it feels like that's a huge factor that's been letting Valor down. Do you feel the same?
Yeah. And luckily, I mean, it's just a trip to Forge next week, so I'm sure they'll get on on the winning run. But I don't know. Like I've been like super positive on Sean Hondo, obviously, and thinking he could do a lot, but yeah, he's really struggled to get in the games. I don't know how much of that is the system and the players he's with, because it does seem like the only player that's finding him is Antonopoulos. The build-up is quite poor, and so his opportunities are going to be limited. He's going to be a player now that isn't. Other players in those forward sort of lines are the ones being used as combination players, and he's meant to be this number 9, just be in the box and like play just between the sticks. Don't keep moving around. And when you're playing on a bad team and that's your role, you're not going to get many opportunities to affect games, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. And you're expecting to have him be a little bit more involved in that sense. Like if you're
Mm.
not getting service as a striker, which we saw pretty much all of last year be the issue with Valor, with all of the
Mm.
players that they had there, with like Siage and with Novak, and you could argue Ponce a bit when he was through the middle as well. You have to just get involved. You have to be able to play a little bit more and not like drop back and be that false 9 necessarily, but just try to connect a little bit
Mm.
more and create the space for yourself if the other players can't help you create that space. So I feel like Sean Hundal needs to adjust his game a little bit because Valor haven't started well. I'm sure if he had that service, he able to put it away a bit more consistently. But I mean, he had that great chance from Montenegro and
Mm.
nothing
Yeah,
really
it's poor
occurred
header.
there. There's this really
But,
poor header. So
yeah, but
it's something that he needs to work on if he wants to be the guy for Valor
yeah,
this season.
but I mean, on the other side, just like you've listed off all those strikers, Phil dos Santos wasn't like last season, didn't get his team creating opportunities and scoring goals. He's got a whole new team. He's signed all these players that he thinks will do it for him, but they're still not creating many opportunities and they're still not being goal dangerous. So yeah, I agree, like with you, that Sean Hunter does need to do like add more to his game to try and get more involved. But at the same time, you've got to still think about what's Phil dos Santos telling him. What are his instructions?
Hmm.
And does Phil dos Santos need to have a little look at how he's approaching games with the ball?
Yeah, because I mean, you look at Valor, we all know the situation with Valor with how many games that they have away and the fact that
Mm.
they needed a good start to the season to set the tone for this huge long away stead, and it was exactly opposite of that, back-to-back losses in BC, scoring
Mm.
1 goal but conceding 5. It's not what you want to see from Valor, and now Phil Santos has some more weight on his shoulders. Yeah, it's just 2 games in, so there's no use being
Mm.
drastic, but at the same time you look at the games ahead, the fact that he has to face Forge, he has to face Ottawa, he has to face Halifax and Cavalry, York, places that maybe you could see some games where like maybe they can make a point here
Mm.
or maybe 3 points there, but I mean these are all really tough places to be able
Yeah.
to go and try to get points, and you would want to have some momentum going into those tough fixtures, and they don't have any right now. So it's a lot of pressure on Phil Dos Santos, and I want you to be brutally honest here, because I know, you got your Valor goggles and everything, but they have what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more games, I think, not including the Canadian Championship. They have, I think, 5 more games in this away set. How many points do you see Valor realistically taking from the next 5 games?
It's really hard to see where they'll get some. Obviously it's Forge next, Ottawa after that, York United at home, maybe York, a very funny team at home. And then a trip to Halifax after that. You just have to see how Halifax start performing once they get home and start seeing how they adapt to the system. But I mean, they could come out of this long stretch with maybe 3 points, like the way they're playing, 3 or 4 points, and that's not what owners will be hoping for.
Exactly. I'll be honest, that's me too. I think being most generous, they'll get 4 points. I think maybe they can snatch a win at York and then draw one of those games, but that's being the most generous. And it's
but at the same time, they could come out with nothing. Like when you're looking at it,
exactly, they could come out with 0, and they'll be rock bottom of the table. If they come out with nothing, just 0 points, and there's got to be a big
change in how they're approaching games. Like it's got to change pretty dramatically.
And the big question is, Phil Dos Santos obviously got that contract and everything, but at what point do the ownerships pull the trigger? Like, if they're 5-6 games on 0 points, something's got to give, right? So. The other questions, are they even interested enough in the team to warrant to think that drastically, and to think to pull the trigger? It's something that we'll have to see as the weeks go on, but it's a tough time in Winnipeg right now for Valor and their fans, and hopefully we see a little bit of an upside as things progress. Let's move on now to our third match, which is Atletico Ottawa against Cavalry FC. This is arguably the biggest match of the weekend here. Oh, no, actually, the second biggest match. What am I saying? The last match was the biggest match, the 905 Derby. But still a really, really big match there. It was a game where it felt like the old adage is a game of 2 halves, obviously, but it really did feel that way in this, because Ottawa started pretty well. They were quite attacking. It felt like Cavalry, the way that they set up in like a sort of like a back 5, because they had Bradley Candom, in at the left mid position as a left back. And then I found that very odd. And then I saw how they started playing, and then immediately went into a back 5. I was like, oh, okay, out of possession, Cannon's tucking into as a left wing back. I'm guessing it's a try to avoid overloads out wide because of the dangers that they have with Debrian and Twardek, so they don't get overloaded on the wings. It's pretty pragmatic, pretty smart from Cavalry, but even still, I felt like Ottawa did pretty well to be able to break past that. I mean, they weren't as free-flowing and attacking as maybe how we saw at the end of the game against York, but still, like, they were building pretty well. For me, one of the biggest issues with Ottawa early on in the match is I still am not convinced of Ollie Bassett as this sort of right wing position. I understand it's sort of like an inverted role because he's going to have Twardek bombing down the right, so he's going to be playing more centrally anyways. But I just feel like he's a player that needs to be even more central. He needs to be a player that needs to be even more of a focal point for him to really influence games. And it feels like he's playing a little bit of a bit part role compared to the roles that he was playing and occupying last season. And so that wasn't really something that I really enjoyed seeing him there. I don't think he was influencing the game as much as you might have wanted to if you were an
No.
Ottawa fan. But aside from that, there were some really good battles out there. Akio versus Debrian, that was a battle that I was watching very closely.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really good. I think they canceled each other out for most of the game, which
Mm.
was something that, up until Ali Musi came in, which changed the game, but we'll get there. That was a really, really good fight between. But for you, Mike, looking at the first half from Ottawa's perspective, were you expecting a little bit more from them, or given the fact that Cavalry were sort of playing so defensively sound and they were
Mm.
so defensively smart and they were in how they were out of possession, do you think it was around how Ottawa were expecting to play?
Yeah, I still feel like the excitement building up, like with all the signings building into the season, has obviously sort of made us think that Ottawa will go off and run away with things, and it started off a little slower. And they're building in, and they're having to build these partnerships, and players having to find their roles. And yeah, after that York game, you did think, okay, well, actually, this isn't going to be a sort of blow the doors off in the first opening few weeks. There's going to be some time that it's going to take, and they're having to sort themselves out. Because, I mean, in our sort of previews, I think the majority of us, our predictions were like Ollie Bassett will be the assist leader, Sam Salter's going to be a Golden Boot winner, and neither of those two have really settled, I don't think, into the team yet. They're still working their way in. And Tommy Wooden Jr. is a really good coach at prepping to nullify the opposition and then try to build out what they're doing. And they just came up against a really good coach and a really well-organized team.
Yeah, it was. I was impressed with Cavalry in the way that they were structured, because it was a game that they could have easily tried to sort of play toe to toe with Ottawa, because they have their own sort of attacking talents that you could see them being really strong and taking advantage of the gaps that were in behind. Because we talked about that a little bit last week, where you had York trying to exploit a little bit of the spaces that Twarduk and Dibrian were leaving in behind, and they had a little bit of success with that. But in the end, I think with Tommy Wilden Jr., he's such a, like I mentioned, he's such a pragmatic coach rather. He's such a pragmatic coach for his players that you are going to get a game where he thinks about the other team and thinks about how to nullify them, maybe as much as the way that he wants his team to play, which is different from other coaches like Afshin Gatbi and like Patrice Geyser, that have told in pre-match and post-match press conference that they really only think about their team. They like to think about the other team in terms of making some tweaks and the like, but it's not the same as with Tommy, where you can see it's like, oh, you have a plan in place for this specific match against this specific opposition. I now understand why, and you can see how effective it is. But aside from that, it was a first half that was relatively quiet. Obviously, second half came, and we didn't see any halftime subs, so no one was like James Merriman there. But we will talk about substitutions, because I think substitutions changed the game in the second half. But the second half began. Ottawa came out a little bit more intense, flying out a little bit more, and they got their goal from the corner kick. A really funny goal for those that were watching the broadcast, because there was this Ottawa fan was yelling this entire time, just encouraging. I think he had a couple beers in him, but he had a mic right beside him. It genuinely felt like he had a mic right in front of his face, like a on the field reporter. And he said to Carducci, it's like, goalie, this corner is going in. And then Ollie chipped it right for Didic. Didic headed it in, and even Adam Jenkins and Ollie Platt, the commentators on the game for One Soccer, acknowledged the fact that the guy called it. But really, really good goal. It was something that I saw it, immediately thought of you because you talked about this being a cheat code
Yeah.
of like just set pieces, Ollie Bassett to Amir Didic, just spam that as much as you can. You're gonna get goals. Second
Yeah.
game of the season, we got exactly that. We got we got Didic getting his first goal for the club, and it was
Yeah.
a really good moment for him because all of the players that are being brought in have a lot of expectations, but he, especially in
Mm.
the defense, has huge expectation because
Yeah.
Ottawa are very top heavy. For him to get that goal as well, to show that he can step up in attacking situations as well as in defensive situations, was pretty big. But at this point, did you think that Ottawa getting that goal were like, okay, now we're going to see them be in the driver's seat, now we're going to see them take it on, they're going to try to go get a second goal and really put Cavalry under pressure? Or did you have the foresight to feel like, oh, maybe they're going to sit back and that might hurt them?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I was sitting at it thinking, well, Cavalry are good, decent defensively, and like in the game against Forge before, in this one, you felt just wanted them to be sort of set free a little bit, some of their attack. We just wanted to see like a few changes to be made, and I'm still very much on the Sergio Camargo for MVP bandwagon this year as a big outside shot. He's had a really great start, and obviously he was he just played about an hour of this one, but he's been a really bright spark in the team. Whereas some of these other forward players aren't having the impact from the start. So I was a little bit concerned, thinking, yeah, Ottawa could probably do something with this and just manage this game out and try and limit what Cavalry do, and we'll see Blue Tableau maybe or a player like that not judge the line a bit better and get in the back onto one of these passes, onto one of these through balls over the top later on in the game. But yeah, Tommy changed it up, like you said, and we saw a bit of a shift in what they were doing, and they really did force. They sort of forced Ottawa's hand.
Yeah, because with Tommy, he brought some subs in. He brought in quite a few subs in the end. I think first it was Ali Musi and Leighton Brooks, or was it Tobias Wachowski? I can't remember. It was Lucas Diaz, right? Okay, so I can't remember the exact order, but it was these players like Leighton Brooks, Tobias Wachowski, Ali Musi, Lucas Diaz. In the offseason, we were talking about how Cavalry was adding some depth in some positions to really help them out when maybe some of the players weren't playing all that well. And this was exactly that example of them having I wouldn't say they had a poor game, because it wasn't a poor game up until that point, I think, for Cavalry. But you could see that there was something lacking, similar to the situation with James Merriman with Pacific, where you had players that were maybe needing a little bit more energy, or positions that were needing a little bit more energy from the players. And you brought these players in and they made a really huge impact. Obviously, the goal that came at the very end was courtesy of two of the substitutions. But it was interesting because, well, one coach made really positive substitutions. The other coach, in Carlos Gonzalez, made sort of negative substitutions because he took out Balou Tabla, which was crazy. I don't know if it's a fitness or if it was purely tactical. If it was purely tactical, then I'm sorry, but that's a huge mistake, in my opinion, to take off a player as exciting and as dangerous as Balou Tabla and put on, Maxime Tussaud, who is a good player, but it's defensive. And then they went back into this sort of back five. They went back into the Ottawa of old. And as soon as that happened, I was like shaking my head, because I was like, oh no, I know how this story goes. I've seen this
We
movie
saw this
before.
6 or 7 times at the end of last year.
Exactly. I've seen this movie before, and in the end, it was exactly as I thought it was predicted. They choked it at the very end, and another 90th minute goal.
Yeah.
Chris Twardek, unfortunate for him, because he had a really good game. I think and he's had a really good start to the season. Chris Twardek, he's really impressed me. Arguably, probably only 2 games in, but arguably the best right back in the league so far. Really unfortunate for him to get that own goal, but Fraser Aird, who really good cross in from out wide, which is one of the reasons I think Fraser Aird should start as a wing back, is because his delivery into the box is so good for Cavalry. Leighton Brooks pounces on it, forces Chris Twardek to put it into the back of his own net, and Cavalry steal a point at the end. But for you, Mike, was this something that, again, was it naive of Carlos Gonzalez to maybe go back to his old habits and switch to 5 at the back? Is that something that maybe was expected of him whenever it was the first time that we really saw their backs against the wall in the second half, where he was more likely to make changes? Or do you think it was just a case of the players maybe not stepping up defensively as they should have throughout the 90 minutes again?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I was disappointed to see them do that, especially after how the season finished last year, and to gift Cavalry the ball and say, like, right, we're dropping back, we'll soak up pressure. You've brought players into this squad who are good with the ball. You've brought players that want to make this big impact as a sort of Canadian Premier League super team, and you can't just go back to just soaking up pressure and hoping to see out games again, because we saw it didn't work last year. And you've now got these players who should be sort of dictating the game, and to then sit back and be passive. Cavalry were bringing on players who could affect the game. They were going to put them under pressure and look for mistakes to be made, and that's exactly what happened. So I think if I was an Ottawa fan, I'd be really, really frustrated with how Carlos Gonzalez sort of slipped back to type for the end of this one.
Yeah. And he mentioned in the post-match that I wrote down here that the idea was to drop into a 5-2-3, not a 5-4-1, and that the 5-4-1 made them drop into straight lines and give them the meters to make the team drop and, see space and possession to Cavalry. So maybe if the players were able to do exactly like he wanted, a 5-2-3 that still made them a bit more dynamic and made them be able to get a bit better handle on the game, it could have gone better. But I just feel like, and this might be because I'm a Tottenham fan and I love Ange Postecoglou and the way that he plays, but I feel like Ottawa need to commit to a style. I don't think with the players that you have, you can revert 180 from the super attacking, high intensity, overloading on the wide areas and really putting your opponent under pressure, to then in the middle of a game switching back to how they were last year, which is very defensively structured, which is very sort of counterattack heavy, which is very, it has to be organized, focused 100%, because it didn't work last season. And I thought we moved past that from an Ottawa perspective. So I feel like you have to just commit to the style. Don't go back to a 5 at the back. You can make it a little bit more defensive by maybe switching out an attacking player like, I don't know, like Manny Aparicio, and putting in a more defensive midfielder or something along those lines. Switching the shape maybe a little bit to be a bit more compact, but not to go back to a 5 at the back, because I feel like you kind of undo everything that you've been building towards. And we've seen this movie before. I don't want to keep seeing the same movie over and over again with Ottawa. And I just feel like you just got to commit to it. And if it blows up in your face and it doesn't work in a game and you lose because of it, well, there's growing pains. You obviously want to perform because of the pressure on you, but there is going to be growing pains. And I would personally rather see a coach commit to his style and fall on his sword than have second thoughts and revert back to an old style and then still sort of fail. So I think for me, that's the biggest thing. I don't know if you agree with my little monologue there on the Carlos Gonzalez's content.
Yeah, I do. I do. I think they need to be something and make teams that, like they said about Vancouver, they've got their setup and they're not going to adapt for the opposition. They're going to play and make the opposition adapt to them, and that's what Ottawa need to do if they're going to be successful.
Yeah, Exactly, and it was unfortunate for them in the end though, because Max Tissot, talking about being a super defensive player, had a fantastic opportunity at the end, and he couldn't put it away, and then they Cavalry literally went right back across, and that's what led to the Tuarte goal. So it could have been a very different story. I would
Yeah,
have probably kept my
true.
monologue, but still could have been a very different story. Similar to in the Halifax Vancouver game when Halifax hit the post and then Vancouver immediately went up and score, or it wasn't, I think it was immediate, but like they hit the post, they didn't get a rebound, while Vancouver hit the post and did get the rebound. So sometimes it's a little bit about luck, but overall, I think Cavalry will be disappointed on the basis of play of the second half, because they really put Ottawa under pressure, and you could have seen them get that win. And for Cavalry, 2 games away from home, only 1 point, not the start that Tommy Wilden Jr. wanted. Obviously, they haven't had a home game, so I think that'll be a welcome sight, similar to Halifax. But do you feel like there's any reasons for concern, any early signs of worry for Cavalry on the basis of these 2 games? Because, first game they faced Forge, and Forge is super, super strong. This game they faced Ottawa, and they didn't start all that great, and they conceded the early goal. They managed to save it right at the end. Do you feel like there's any cause for concern across the opening 2 games, or something that you might want to see be a bit different from Cavalry in the games to come?
No, I think, they'll be disappointed not to have got a win in one of these, but I think they've performed really well in stages of games where you can see, actually, like once they get in their groove, they'll be able to play like this for longer periods of matches. And we've seen Tommy Wilden Jr. now make changes to how his team are attacking and become more attacking as the game goes on, and try and fight back to win games, and got the draw in this one. So I'm looking at them and thinking, they're defensively resolute. They're probably not going to be the top scorers this season, but I can see them making changes to try and actually go after games. So I think once they get a few more games in and get a game at home, I mean, they played 2 very, very good sides as well. So it's a few different changes, new strikers coming in. Obviously, there's the whole sort of losing Maya Bevan. Is with that happening late on, it's something they're having to really adapt to. I thought Malcolm Shaw had a decent game in his sort of link-up play. So there's lots of good things about them, which I think will just sort of kick into gear more as the season goes on.
Yeah, exactly. They still have a lot of quality. They still have a lot of reasons. I don't think it's time for them to necessarily be worried of the fact that they're out of the race or whatever. No, it's still super early in the season, but I feel like there's some things that, like you mentioned, some players need to maybe settle in a little bit more. I was impressed by Lucas Diaz in the game. I think he kind of showed some really good signs that shows why he's an exciting player. Leighton Brooks, I think Tommy Wilden Jr. is still finding the balance of which of the new players do I want to immediately throw into the deep end, have them be consistent starters, or which players need a little bit more time to balance. Who from the old guard from last season, deserves to still be there. Who maybe am I looking to switch out because I want to, adapt and grow. I feel like there's still a little bit of those. I mentioned growing pains for Ottawa, and then you could say the same for Cavalry because of the depth they brought in. But I still think that they're going to be a very, very good team. And I can't wait to see them at home in the league, and not just in the Canadian Championship. Funny enough, the next 3 games for Cavalry are all against BC sides. They're doing Vancouver, then Pacific, and then Vancouver again. So you're going to get really well acquainted. The Calgary folks and Cavalry fans will be really well acquainted with a lot of the BC folk from the province over. So going to be an interesting one to watch there in the next week and a half for Cavalry.
And having had their home Champions Cup game there as well.
Yeah, exactly. Look at that. It's Strong connections. Now we're going to move on to the last match of the match week, which was the 9:05 derby, York United against Forge FC. Just realized now that the graphic is wrong. It wasn't a 2-1 win for York United. It was a 3-0 win
Yeah, it's very
for
different.
Forge FC. I'm sure York United would have loved that.
Yeah.
It was a 3-0 win for Forge FC. Goals by David Chouanier. He got 2, one in the 46th minute, 1 minute into added time, and his second in the 67th minute. And sandwiched in between both of the Chouanier goals was Benny Banga, scoring in the 61st minute. An interesting game between these two, especially in the first half, because York once again started the game pretty well. You know, in front of their own fans. The home crowd was good, really good attendance, and it looked like York were actually giving a good go against Forge to try to get something from this game. I know a lot of people were going to thinking that York were going to get, trounced, and in the end they kind of did. But the first half, it looked really good. What did you make of York's first half against Forge in this game?
I did. It was like the Ottawa game. They started like with some conviction. They were putting them under pressure, and they were looking to try and make things happen. And I remember looking back, like when this game finished, and the final score, and how Forge took over, and I was looking back, and the way that Forge was so dominant at the end, I was almost sort of second guessing myself, because it's like were York this? I was sure they were good in the first half. I'm sure they were they looked confident, but Forge weathered it, and that goal just before half time, just you can see that just sunk the York players, and the morale around that team. It was just a bit of a gut punch to them, and that sort of changed how the game went on in the second half. They didn't recover to the way they played in the opening stages.
Yeah, because it felt like York were doing well in the build-up, and they were doing well to try to be that threat in their counterattack. And I think Bahia had an early shot. The Kalongo had the save, and they were looking more threatening. They didn't have glorious opportunities like the Austin Reach chance against Ottawa, but they had opportunities. But it just felt like that goal for Chouanier right before halftime, it had been coming, because how many times have Forge being able to find Chouanier in behind? He had an opportunity earlier that he should have put away, that he dragged it just wide of the far post. And you'd expect that the defense is like, okay, let's not let that happen again. But they let it happen again on the other side. So it was like York's offense needed to be a bit more compact, and need to follow the runners. They needed to be a bit more switched on. And granted, to York, why I don't want to get on to their defense too much is their two starting center backs haven't played a minute in this season so far. Frank Stirring and Oswaldo Leon, they're both out, and it had to be Higgins, which was he did pretty well up until the third goal, which we'll talk about. He did pretty well, and he's done pretty well to step up to the plate as a very late signing. And Noah Abadne, we were both very high on him as a young center back, but they're not the starting center backs for York United. They're not the players that Martin Ash wanted to rely on in these important opening games of the season. So I can't get on their backs too much, but still, it was just annoying for me that it was the same thing over and over of just dragging the center backs apart, and then just chipping a ball in behind for the player that was running in through, which is most of the time Chouanier, that really hurt them in the end. But I mean, it was a game where defenses played a huge part. I mean, there were some pretty big blocks, saving some shots from goalkeepers having to do something, and it felt like it was a game that looked to be much more even until that goal from Chouanier in at the end of the first half. Did you feel as soon as that goal went in, where it was like, oh, here we go, like the momentum switching, and now this is in Forge's bag?
Yeah, this game's done now. They just you could see that York had worked really hard to try and like match Forge where they could as the game started, and you could see that they were working so much harder than Forge. But once Forge got that opportunity, like they had further gears to go up, whereas York were going down the gears after that.
Yeah, and Forge, switching the focus onto them, I mean, the second half, they really came into their own. Some of the players that stepped up were, there's so many. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, David Chouanier with 2, Baribanga got the goal, Tristan Borges. What a renaissance he's had in these last few games, including the CPL final. Like, I feel like the CPL final last year awoke in him again, and we're getting this really, really world-class comparative to the league, Tristan Borges, that we haven't seen since, 2019, I guess, at this level. Just his playmaking is almost second to none in the way that he does such a good turn to be able to feed it into Benny Baribanga, and he's just finding these pockets, finding these passes. He's playing with so much confidence. He's playing with so much swagger that as someone that worked at Forge and saw him in 2019 and everything, I was just loving, because I was like, this is the Borges that I remember. This is the Borges that I was hailing in the first year of the CPL. So I was super, super impressed with Borges. Chouanier as well, because he's a player that we didn't really see all that much last season. He didn't have too much of an impact. This game got 2 goals. Arguably should have had a hat trick. Really influential. I mean, Daniel Parra. I mean, the entire back line, really, especially the young players in the back line. Daniel Parra, Malcolm Duncan, and Malak Olawabi Bellewu. Those players all stepped up. Bellewu had that huge stop 16 minutes in, then he almost bounced into the net. That Kalongo had to pick up. Kalongo, another really good game from him. Parra, I mean, I'll spoil it. Like, I'll say it right now, he was my player of the week, because he was so solid in possession. He was shifting from the left side to the right side, had some really good crosses into the box, 2 really good crosses for Terran Campbell that Campbell, you could argue, should have done much better. He had that assist for Chouanier. He had that ball in behind towards Borges. He was just so influential from as a young Mexican left back, and we really didn't know anything about it. I really didn't know what to make of him and how much he was going to affect. I thought Kwasi Poku was going to be the starting.
It's bad news for him, isn't it?
Yeah, terrible news for him. Fantastic news for Parra, how well he's playing, but just so many solid performances from Forge. Was there anybody else that really impressed you from Forge in the second half, or anything you want to add on the players that I mentioned there?
Yeah, I mean, to jump on Olabi Bellewu was my player of the week. He's just been fantastic. I've just been so impressed with how he stepped into this team, and not just. I mean, defensively he's been fantastic, but he's bringing the ball out well. He's creating, like, he's being the starting point of attacks when they're building out from the back. So he's just been fantastic, and we spoke about Chouanier and Borges especially as last year things didn't quite go to plan. Okay, players have gone, now there's a chance to just get a run excuse me, and they need to recapture some form, and they really have. I thought it would. I didn't really think it would be so quick with the goals. I had Terran Campbell. He was my prediction for Golden Boot by the end of the season, thinking, well, these players are going to start trying to find him more and create the opportunities, but it's sort of gone the other way around. I mean, and Benny Badibanga's doing his best, trying to show up Ayman Salouf with all his sort of drags, the soles of the feet and quick feet dancing and coming in and out again. So it's really exciting. I mean, they've looked really good to start the season.
Yeah, and one of the things that we were talking about before the start of the season was the fact that can Forge step up to the plate now that they lost those big players? I particularly said, can the young players step up to the plate to the level that Forge requires? And they have, and much more than I was expecting, much more than I think a lot of people were expecting. they've been stepping up to the plate. And the great thing is it's not just them too. It's some of the players that we haven't seen step up all that much, like David Choinière or like a Tristan Borges, that weren't as consistently that good in the last season or two, and now are starting to really come into. So it's a bit of both of these young, exciting, hungry players, and then some of the old guard that are kind of like stepping up and guiding these players. And it feels like a really good, cohesive unity in the team that makes them so strong. And it's gonna be tough to see them be stopped by anyone in the league right now, because they look like a machine. The way that they're playing, the buildup that they have, it's so, like, you can see it's so second nature. And the fact that they are able to be as dominant as they were in that second half against a York United side that kind of deflated in the second half. It was just they were just second best in pretty much every regard. It shows, like this Forge FC are nothing to play with. Like they mean business. They mean serious business.
Sumaru was a big miss for York. Adekugbe played well. No knock to him, but Sumaru is such an important part of this team, which affects how they defend. So then going on from what you're saying about those attacking players, like, and players stepping up, we've seen Kyle Becker just be able to get on with his game and not have to carry the player. Like, Kyle Becker's had weight taken off his shoulders, and he can just keep going with what he like, and he can just really just do his role rather than trying to do two or three people's role. And it's like the forward line being this dynamic and this confident from the start is, I mean, that's great for Kyle Becker because he can be playing there with Hajabapur, and those two can just be so, like, they can just dictate the play from the middle and get the play going, break up transitions and start again. And it's just makes everyone's role on this team even easier, which is not what you want when you're coming up against them.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one thing I want to talk about before we move on, and we would finish up with the match week roundup, and that's the third goal, because there's a lot of controversy in this third goal of, did the ball cross the line? First of all, if we're honest, Higgins shouldn't have let it get to that point. I think Higgins, I understand shielding the ball and everything, but if you're going to shield the ball, you got to put your arms back and around. It felt like it was a little bit too casual. But nevertheless, really good determination from Borges to be able to get to it and poke it past for Choinière to finish. But I got two frames for the visual viewers. I have two frames. The first one is from like the regular camera frame where you basically watch the whole match, and it looks like the ball is still sort of in from that angle. I'm not too sure, but then on the replay, when they zoom in, the ball does look like it went out. And it's a little bit, I mean, again, it's a tough angle. If you look at that angle, it's not, maybe it's not the best angle to look at. And also you can see that because Higgins is there, it kind of blocks the view of the assistant referee. So maybe he can't make it out. The ball has fully gone out, so it's a bit harsh on the assistant referee. I don't want to bring in, the forbidden word of VAR into it. Maybe we can avoid things like that if you have a little bit of that in you too. But for you, did you think that was out when that goal was scored, or did you think it was illegal?
It wasn't until things came back that I was curious. Like, but in the speed of the game, you can't, like, the referee and the linesman, like you say, Higgins is there blocking the ball as well from the linesman. Like, you can't, it's way too tight for it's called with the naked eye. So, like, for me, as a neutral, you could always just watch me that. Well, I can take the ref side on that. That's quite easy. I imagine if you're a York fan, or if it happens to a club you support, you'd be up in arms and angry and
100%.
screaming for VAR and goal line technology. But I think I think I would cut them some slack, like, because the speed of play is so much faster that they don't have the luxury of doing this. So I'm not too angry. Like, it was great work from Borges. We'll give him that.
No, great work again. Probably shouldn't have allowed him to get there in the first place. Higgins, which is sad because he had a really great, pretty good game, all things
Yeah.
considered, in this one. It is like, even if it was over the line, it's not like it would have made that much of a difference, really.
No, exactly, yeah.
2-0, 3-0, Forge were cruising at that point, so not much, I think, to really be aggrieved about. But yeah, overall, really solid performance from Forge and York United. 0 points still from 2 games. Martin Nash will have to really think about how he can get this team firing on all cylinders. And I think that'll be something that we're going to be looking forward to as the weeks go on. That is the end of our match week recap. We're going to quickly move to a little bit of a prediction section because, as I mentioned before, the Canadian Championship is starting. We have 2 matches this week. Today, Cavalry face against Vancouver. Tomorrow, Toronto FC face off against Simcoe County Rovers. To make sure that this episode isn't 2.5 hours, we're not going to go too deep into these ones. We're just going to quickly give our predictions into it. Cavalry have their first game at home, albeit not in the CPL, but it is in the Canadian Championship. They weren't able to have the home game, like you mentioned, the Champions Cup. So it's the first time that they're really home since the matches in the playoffs. So it's going to be a big buzz at Atco Field for the fans. Mike, I'll start with you. What are you predicting for Cavalry versus Vancouver to unfold, and what would you think the final score will be?
I think Vancouver, we're going to see some of that rotation, like you said, when we're talking about them. There's going to be a few changes with their starting lineup and going away for the first time. Cavalry, like you say, back. I don't think they'll make as many changes. They want to get a win under their belts. They've played 4 games this year already, 1 point out of all of it. So this is going to be really important for them to get to winning ways in front of the crowd. I think it's going to be super tight, though. I've gone with 1-0 Cavalry.
That's very fair. Yeah, I feel like, again, Vancouver's depth is going to be really tested in this one, and I don't know, because Afshan Gabi has had 2 unchanged lineups the last 2 games. I don't know how the other players are going to be able to step up, both off the bench and the players that weren't dressed, and they're probably going to be called into action. And I don't know if they have, the sort of sharpness in this match to make the difference. I might be proven wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong, because if Vancouver win, then Vancouver FC hosts the Whitecaps and Langley, which would be a massive match in the Lower Mainland. So I'm really hoping, selfishly, that Vancouver FC win. But I do think that it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be 2-2 after regular time, and it's going to go all the way to penalties. And I think in penalties, Cavalry will have the edge, but I could see it going either way. I just feel like Cavalry at home, the more experienced side, yes, they only have a point after 2 games, but that doesn't discount them as a bad team or as a good team. They still are a really good team, and they have some really good players. And I just feel like with a home crowd in front of them, the fact they haven't been there in so long, the buzz, it's going to be a huge asset. And we haven't seen Vancouver on the road yet, so we'll see if they can embody a little bit of the Whitecaps in terms of being really, really good away from home as well. So we'll see there. And then for the second match, Toronto FC against Simcoe County Rovers. It's MLS against League One. Usually this only goes one way. So I'm looking at our predictions right now, and I can sort of understand. But Mike, just for posterity, what is your prediction for this match?
I mean, Toronto need goals. They need to keep improving. It's been a decent start to the year for them, but they're not exactly banging in goals in MLS. So I think they'll go out here and show their prisoners. I'm going 4-0.
Yeah, it feels a bit harsh, obviously, in Simcoe County Rovers, and you'd love an underdog story. A little bit of maybe the Coventry against Manchester in the FA Cup that was
exactly.
But don't know if this is the game, really. Toronto haven't looked great, but I think they still have enough quality and class in them to be able to
Yeah.
put them away. I gave Simcoe a little bit more credit than you. Maybe because I want them to, have a good day out. I put Toronto to win 3-1. They'll get a goal. I'm hoping that they'll at least get a goal. I don't think we'll get the result, but I'm hoping that at least they'll get a goal. But yeah, to no one's surprise, I believe we both put Toronto FC to pass on that one. But that is it for our predictions for the upcoming Canadian Championship. We'll finish up quickly just with an update on our power rankings. Not much has changed. Forge is still first. Vancouver FC is still second. Pacific FC are still third. They all won. They're all on 6 points. I believe Forge and Vancouver have the same goal difference as well. So I actually don't know what's separating them right now. Maybe away goal difference because Forge has played away and Vancouver FC has not, because there's no head-to-head there either. So I'll check afterwards. But
Vancouver have got one more goal. They've
do they? 6, okay.
Forge got 5. So yeah.
Okay, never mind then. So Vancouver FC are first. Yeah. But still, Forge FC, because of the quality of teams that they face comparatively to Vancouver, we gave them the edge. Atletico Ottawa are up 1 to 4th. Cavalry FC also up 1 to 5th because of their 1-1 draw. Halifax Wanderers, after their loss against Vancouver and starting the season with 0 points, go down to 6th, but they do sit above York United and Valour, who stay in the same place respectively in 7th and 8th. But that is it for this week. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast episode. Make sure to follow us once again on all of our socials at Coast to Coast FC, so you can give us your thoughts on this week's episode. Do you agree with our power rankings? Do you agree with some of the comments and the views that we had on these matches? Do you think that maybe some of the predictions we have for the Canadian Championship are right or wrong? Let us know, and if we like your comment, we might give you a shout out on next week's show. But until next time, I'm Felipe Ojejo.
And I'm Mike Rice.
And this has been Coast to Coast FC, signing out.